Hey, let's talk about things you don't know until you know, and then you know. I don't know crap about construction. After trying it myself, I'm convinced that framers are wizards. If you know anything about building anything, even a simple chicken coop or an outhouse, which are the two projects I'm going to be trying to film and talk about, don't watch this video. You don't need to. If you want a good laugh, even though I read about it, even though I watched people on YouTube, even though I watched Steve do these things, it never really sank in until I tried it myself. The tools I have used over the years and then have forgotten how to use. We got our circular saw, battery operated, which I assumed would be a lot easier, but what I have found, the weight of the battery and the blade is slightly offset, so it's more difficult to cut a straight line than it is with this worm drive that we picked up real cheap at a garage sale somewhere. A speed square to make sure, things are lining up, your squares and whatnot, which do matter, apparently. T-square, same thing, level with your little bubbles in there. Building an extension on the chicken coop. We used to just let them roam everywhere, but we quickly went from 12 chickens to 2 because of the fox, and they poop everywhere. So we cooped them up. Haha. This looks sad to me. So I'm extending their yard here. And I just like to go over some super simple things that I know a lot of you will go like, no duh, but hey, I thought I'd mention it. So the first thing I want to talk about is building a wall, framing, okay, and why they do it this way. When I started out building the wall, I tried to duplicate what I saw here in the chicken coop, putting all the framing on the outside because that's all I knew. So the problem with building on the inside or outside of a frame is you've got this little jog. What happens is there's this gap here, so I go to put on my wire, I don't have a flat surface to staple it to. One thing you need to know also, just because they call it a 2x4 doesn't mean it's a 2x4, 1.5. Okay, I don't know why they call them 2x4s, because they're not. And this should be 3.5, but it's a little shy. It's an older piece of wood. Why is this important? Because when you start putting these pieces together, you not only have to take into consideration the span that you're trying to cover with your beams, but also the thickness of the material you're using. Put a 2x4 here or some other supports like some of these 4x4s, then I'm going to have to add or subtract accordingly the dimension of the lumber. Again, real obvious to anyone who's done any of this. Just remember, it's not really a 2x4. They do measure differently. So here I did it properly, like framing wizards do, and I put the 2x4 where it belongs, between another, in the frame. Okay, not on the outside, not on the inside, because now if this is flush, I can attach my wire here real easy. Another thing, these handy dandy braces. So my first attempt to stabilize this whole structure, first of all, I was just going to stop here, but then I wanted them to have a little more area, so I doubled it. That's why there's a brace there, and why not? A little more structure, never killed anyone. My first attempt to stabilize and square this whole thing was to use these 4x4s. I removed that one already, but I had these attached to the current structure. Since then, I have humbled myself and asked Steve some questions, who then said, hey, use supports. Now, really cool trick with these things, how to get your measurements correctly. Let me show you. Let's pretend we're gonna cut this bad boy. I'm not gonna do it again for the sake of the video, but how I got these angles rather than measuring and stuff is I held where the wood had to go. So let's say we're gonna put it, we want this to be on the inside of each 2x4 closest to me. We got 2 here sandwiched, but this one and this one. And you take your handy dandy pencil and you just mark where it's gonna go. But those are your angles. I've been calling this side forest, I've been calling that side house, and I mark my pieces, which does make a difference. So I can just put the degrees on my machine over there, slice away, bring it back, and hopefully, if you did everything right, it fits perfectly. Another really slick trick that all of you framing builder wizard types already know. This simple contraption right here will turn you into an octopus. And building stuff like this, 2 hands is never enough. So I've got a board that needs to be put in up here. And look, I don't even have to hold it because I already have one of my octopus arms put in here. So I cut this so tight, it's holding itself. But a lot of times you're off by 1/16 of an inch or whatever. So 3.5 inches, I'm gonna mark that. And I'm gonna screw this guy in as a little shelf, and then we're gonna pound this into place. Screwed in the top at 3.5 inches, because again, that's the width of our board. 3.5 inches, and see there's a gap. It's like sucking air, it's so tight. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to use a hammer to tap it into place, and it won't fall on my head because I got these little guys in place. All right, now you can see no more gap. I pounded them into place. They rested exactly where they need to be. Whoops, hand in the camera, 3.5 inches, which means now this is flush up here and down here. Put screws in here and screw it in place. This is a 1.5, and a 1.5, I'm gonna need a 3-inch screw. This might even be a little long. I mean, if I drive it, you know, the point's gonna come out, but you wanna make sure, you know, your fastener is long enough. So that's how you determine that. Again, obvious, but maybe not. I'm gonna say I've probably rebuilt this thing or made major adjustments for the past 4 days. So it's a learning process. And the whole thing started to rack this way. And again, only having 2 hands, and there's only so much you can do with little blocks, you know, your little octopus blocks holding things up. Get yourself a brace. You know, shove that puppy or get someone to help you shove it over. Use ratchet straps if you want to. Get it as square as you can. Put the little squares in the corner. Use your level. When mixing new lumber with rough cut, a lot of it's going to have to be eyeballed. You just get as close as you can get. So because mine was tilting, we went ahead, we meaning Steve, came and muscled this thing over for me, and then it's screwed on the top and jammed into the ground. That's what this is. It's a temporary brace pushing that thing over until I put my braces in. And braces, we mean this, another one of these. These are scrap pieces of plywood we had sitting around that join the two, I don't know, what do you want to call those boxes, the 2 structures. I initially had 4x4s in the corner. It was just way overbuilt. There's a remaining 4x4. I'm taking those out, and to keep the thing steady and well, upright, we're using these plywood instead. You got the, you know, you got your runners down here, and I think they're called headers when they're up there. And then this middle guy, I put it at 36 inches off the ground because I have a 4x4 down there, which gives me plenty of play when putting on my wire, which is 36 inches. I don't want this to be exact. This hole here, whoop, good. I don't want this opening to be exactly 36 inches because, you know, you need your little bit of seam allowance for all of you who sew, or, you know, you need overlap to staple or attach your wire to. If I did exactly 36, you know, it's too small. I would recommend an extra inch or 2 wire than you do the opening. The bottom of this is 36 inches from the ground. 36 minus 4 inches is 32. I have approximately 32-inch opening from here to here, and I have 36 inches of wire. Did I repeat that enough? This is a drop saw, also known as a chop saw. Chop saw. This one has the miter function to it, so let me get my wood out of the way. Look at this. And so now you can cut at an angle. This is what I was talking about earlier when, you know, marking angles, and you know where you're at because I just blew that right into my eye. So you know the angle right here in this little window tells you where you're at. So we're at a slight angle here. We're gonna want to put it back to 0. Boom. Whoop. So now we are at 0, straight on. Something else that may seem really obvious to you, but wasn't to me, and I actually had to search the internet, is how to unlock the dang thing. It's unlocked right now, but let me show you in its locked position, and I'll show you how to unlock it. You see now how the blade is down and I can't move it? There is a little pin right here that you pull out while pushing, don't grab the trigger. You push down on this while pulling that pin out. All right, we're unlocked again. We're at 0. I don't have a piece of wood there, but the blade rests in that little groove. You pull the trigger. Boom. Don't touch the blade. All right, I got my next handy helpers ready to put this board in. Just use a screw or a single nail, something you can like rip off easily with a crowbar, or in my case, I have a really nice impact driver that does all the heavy lifting for me. Love this thing. And these screws just back right out. So don't try to avoid this stuff. So go ahead and do that. And no matter how hard I tried, you can't avoid math. It's just part of the deal. Put your board in and it looks like this, and you're thinking, oh no, I cut it too big. No, you did not. You cut it perfectly. You want that thing to suck air. You just pound it into submission. Just like hair, you can always cut more, but you can't put it back. And if you got to pound on it too hard, and obviously you need to take a quarter or ½ inch off, then by all means do that. Learning pains. Why people build walls on the ground. If I had built these walls on the ground like a normal person, a wizard, I would have been able to drive my screw through here, this post, into this post. But since I didn't do that, I'm gonna now have to do something called, well, they call it toenail when it's nails. Do they still call it that when it screws like this? Craig joint or something like that. They have jigs for this. We don't have a jig, so you can hold your screw straight up and down until it bites just a little bit. Then you bend your screw like this and you drive it home. Do not unscrew it from the top first, because if you do that, the thing's going to fall and hit you on the head. Now we've got this thing to contend with. Sometimes they fall all the way, like I was to stand here. That's just no good. You don't want that. You work your way from the bottom up. Again, things you don't know until you know. I'm telling you, these people are wizards. Boom. Pencil placement. It's not just for fashion. This thing, you're going to need it. And you're going to be tempted to put it down in weird places. And then you're going to get frustrated. You're going to spend ½ an hour trying to find your pencil or find another one and sharpen it. Just my last board taken down. All the other ones are now where they're supposed to be, on the inside of the frame. This is my door frame, which we can go over later, gladly, if you'd like. Once I explain it, it's obvious, but stuff you don't think about unless you do these things. This board is longer than the opening between this 2x4 and this 2x4 because that board was on the outside. So it rested all the way out to here, giving it an extra, 3.5 here and an extra 3.5 inches there. Now we're going to have to cut it down to fit between the boards. 3.5 times 2 is what? 7. So this board needs to lose 7 inches between your construction site and wherever you keep your saw. You might forget 48 3/4, or someone might interrupt, or you might have to throw a stick for a dog or frisbee, all of the above. Mark the board loud and proud. Get yourself one of these. They don't help at all. They actually hinder a lot of progress, but they sure lift the mood. So I got it measured out to 48 3/4. Made my little mark there, right there. That even though that is sufficient, it does help then to put a speed square on to make sure you've got a nice level mark there. And although the blade does cut straight, everything is 0 should be a nice straight cut. Things do shift occasionally. It really helps to have that visual. So I'm going to go ahead and get my pencil out and mark that. Mark, mark, mark. No, I don't have any construction pencils right now. Those big, funny looking flat pencils, which work better. And you got to get a special pencil sharpener for them too, which we have for some reason. We have 3 or 4 special lumber pencil sharpeners, but no pencils. Measure twice, cut once. So we have our 48, 3/4 right there. Put your board in to where it lines up. Make sure you're on 0 if you have the miter type. I like to walk my blade down as a dry run. Look at there, I got a little bit of a gap until it lands. Now, there is a thing called a kerf, I believe, to take into account the slight amount of wood. The blade's gonna bite your wood and it's gonna take, I believe it's a 1/16 of an inch. So if you wanna get exact, take into account an extra 1/16 of an inch for your kerf. Nice, clean cut, love it. Oh, time to throw stick again? Did you bring me a stick? So I mentioned already, I'm building this chicken run because my chickens are now kept in a little coop and it's sad and I want to make them a run. Also, I needed the practice before building an outhouse. we've got 150 some odd acres, a riding facility with horses. That's another part of what I filmed here. So if you watch any of those, you know, I train horses, I give lessons and take people out into the Umpqua forest. This section we're looking at here is just our mud and mess and where we live, but there is just beautiful hills and trees all around. This thing is an old outhouse that was up by, we have a little lake up there with a cabin too, which you can also see, I believe, on a video where I'm running Linda the excavator. It is so rotted, there's just no salvages. I'm pulling pieces off of it as we go and incorporating it into my chicken coop. What I was initially saying is we have all this acreage, I have my training facility, people come out and they ride and they want a bathroom, go figure. I'm fine with being one with nature, but a lot of people who don't do this or live this way don't want to do that so much. I'm gonna be building an outhouse soon, but really wanted to practice and learn all that I could on a chicken coop before assembling an outhouse. Steve and I went out and we got all the lumber and everything for the outhouse, and it's not cheap to buy all that lumber, and I just felt a lot of pressure to do it right. Here's the old outhouse. It's actually flipped over on its side. Let me show you. Got this mess out here. We're expecting 4 or 5 inches of snow tomorrow too. We're gonna just kind of, anyway, it makes a bunch of mud. But this is an old outhouse that I was going to try and reclaim and save, but there's just no way. So this will be dismantled and thrown mostly in a burn pile. And of course, you know, all this stuff put away. But yeah, I mean, you know, gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet, right? Gotta make a mess before you get to clean it up. So back to our chicken coop. All right, fits like a glove. So it's resting, and I've got my screws started straight up and down. And now I'm going to put it at an angle and drive it in. You want to drive it in nice and deep, just like that. See how it doesn't stick out? It's actually embedded in there. To take this off, before I take it off, since it's holding everything in place, I got to put braces in running this way or this corner. It doesn't really matter. I think I might just put them there so they're next to these guys. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. The whole point is a diagonal brace here and here to keep the structure from leaning this way. A top or bottom piece and a side piece. Diagonal is a brace, and then it keeps it from going like this. And then these ones keep it from going like this. And then together, when you join them, you choose, it becomes strong. This is a paper plate from this morning. I gave him some tuna fish and sunflower seeds. Oh, short order, they've got poop all over it. This is Kate the rooster. We thought we all had hens, and apparently we did not. He is one of the best roosters ever. Who's a pretty bird? Pretty bird. We already had these braces in. Whoop, got some treacherous footing here. If you want them to look kind of similar, and I'm assuming you do want them to look a little bit similar, don't sweat it. We're not, like I said, building fine furniture or grand pianos. But if you want them to look similar, you measure this opening here, which is about 7.5, 8 inches. Here, 7.5, 8 inches. It's actually 7.5 here, 7.5 there. Use the handy dandy trick I showed earlier where you hold the board up, in place, and you mark your angles, and boom, twins. Huh? So let's get this lonely guy his twin. Mine is a 7.5 inch mark, and then eyeball kind of where the other piece goes. The twin is over there, so we're trying to match that one. So we're gonna mark there, and we're gonna mark there. I messed up. So rather than try to erase, which just makes a mess, just scribble. This is what I do. That means not that one, this one. Start cutting. Stud. All right, so we got these two in, we got these two in. Yeah, that guy's a little short. I got a little cattywampus with the angle, which to me is more important to get right so you don't have embarrassing gaps. And taking off some of the angle, it lost a little length, but that's okay. You're still a stud. So with these braces now in place, I should be able to take off this temporary thing. I'm thinking I'm gonna probably put another 2x4 back here. Whoops. I love him, but he's one of the most clumsy cats I've ever known. It's gonna be a 2x4 level with this plywood, and then pushed up against our current structure, and then we'll fill the gaps in with other pieces of lumber. But I think we're in the home stretch now. And this is why I practice with the chicken coop before attempting anything even like an outhouse. It's just growing pains. This is our door, which I already, obviously built. The dimensions are approximately 1/2 inch, so like 1/4 inch on each side, but 1/2 inch narrower and 1/2 inch shorter than the door opening on my structure. Why? Because especially with green wood, it swells and shrinks and twists and does all sorts of funky things, and you want to allow a little gap all the way around for it to continue swinging freely. Hinges will just screw on, so I put them on the door first. I hold the door up, mark where the hinges lay, and screw them in. At least that's the idea. Steve's been doing this stuff a while. He doesn't use a pencil. He just crunches the wood with the blade.